All right, I think we are live. That was not what I meant to do. Good morning, everybody. My name is Gray. I'm the Executive Director of Worldbuilders, and it is 11s. During the fundraisers, we always end up having guests come on and doing things at 11 a.m. every day. And honestly, if you're from Europe watching this, it's for you. But also for everybody else too. And it is an exquisite delight to have here today Nghi Vo. And I say it's an exquisite delight because, full disclosure, Nghi and I go back to the live journal days, in terms of how long we've known each other. And so I can tell you right now that it was a lot of fun when I first got my hands on a copy of The Empress of Salt and Fortune, and I saw that you had been doing the writing. And then when all of the praise for it came out and it was nominated, and then you came out with Chosen the Beautiful, and I'm just like, my friend Nghi, I always knew she could do it. It's amazing. And at the same time, I will tell you that if you're wondering if back then Nghi thought that I was going to be the executive director of a charity in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, interviewing her on Twitch, I'm betting no.
No, I think it was something a little more like I always figured that when you first saw Empress, it was a little more like, wow, she hasn't accidentally killed herself in some sort of weird, bizarre freak accident yet. Well done, Nghi. It's just that's what I figure everyone says when they knew me before and see my book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I should actually read be all official like and read your bio and stuff. So
Oh, sure.
here we go. Nghi Vo is
I overshared from live journal days, so
yes. Well, that's always fun. Nghi Vo is the author of the acclaimed novellas When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain and The Empress of Salt and Fortune, a Hugo, Locus, and Ignite Award finalist, and the winner of Reddit's Stabby and IAFA's Crawford Award. Born in Illinois, she now lives on the sunny shores of Lake Michigan. She believes in the ritual of lipstick, the power of stories, and the right to change your mind. The Chosen and the Beautiful is her debut novel. I gotta say, it has a beautiful cover. I saw your unboxing video on Instagram, which I think we can put a link. Yeah, it's in the chat, which is absolutely delightful, especially when you like, that is the title. That is my name. It's just wonderful there.
it's not something you really expect. It's just, you're working for a couple years and, your agent and your editor are wonderful, but it's all very ephemeral up until that point. There's like, until then, it's like some sort of weird author LARP,
Yeah.
They could totally just be pulling one over on me and this is not real at all.
Yeah, it's just like how do we keep her occupied? Well, let's pretend like we're gonna publish her, and then that'll work.
It's like you talk about my book and I'll just be occupied for days. It's not hard.
You mentioned I spent time reading through all the interviews previously so that I could try and ask entirely original questions, which won't necessarily do it. So I'm first going to talk a little bit about Empress. Was that you said one of the most deeply flattering things you heard when the reviews were coming out was that you had managed to fit a multi-book fantasy epic into about 100 pages. And I want to concur on that. I remember closing it and being like, that was too short. I want more. I want to explore this world. And at the same time, it was every bit as have every bit as many turnarounds and oh shit moments as any Game of Thrones epic kind of thing in there. It was just amazing. But do you remember how you pitched The Empress of Salt and Fortune when people asked you to do that? You did an am I the asshole kind of thing?
When it comes to pitching it, you mean like just give everyone an elevator pitch of what it is?
Yeah, you did a particular one in an interview, and I could read it, but then I'd have to
Oh, right. The
Yeah,
Am I the Asshole one.
yeah, exactly. Can you?
Is would I be the asshole if and I can't, I'm gonna butcher it, but would I be the asshole if I use the tools of my oppressor to bring down the empire from the inside through a system of fortune tellers and mystery? Um, the nice thing about the main character Inyo is that she absolutely is comfortable being the asshole. That's like a law. That's a decision she made a long time ago. So she's that's she's only asking for internet cred at that point.
Right. Yeah. And, pardon me. Yeah, it was a delight to read, and so I'm gonna do that same kind of pitch challenge for you, because everywhere you look at The Chosen and Beautiful online, people keep saying Gatsby, 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 and in fact, a shout out. One of our people in chat last night was talking about how much she was looking forward to your book and with the things. And I mentioned we were interviewing you, and she's going to see it in post. She now has to actually work for a living, unlike us. But here's my question for you. Hypothetically, if there was somebody who was a fan of your previous work but had never read The Great Gatsby, how would you pitch the book to them?
Let's see. I think in my case, it would be like the author asking, would I be the asshole if I took an American classic and ran through a ringer of questions about race and class and money, and then added a bunch of demons to it because I can never leave well enough alone? That'd be one way to do it. The other way to do it is imagine the biggest feelings that you've ever had, and then imagine magnifying them all through the lens of one summer where everything is magical. You can really sell your soul to the devil, and your friends are on a self-destructive ride to hell, and you can't stop them. But you're also kind of not enjoying the ride, but you kind of are. And that'd probably be how I would sum it up. And it's the 1920s, and demons exist.
Okay. Well, that's demons exist as in like just everywhere, or
Yeah, that's just a thing that happens.
just a thing?
It's
Nice.
just a thing that happens to us now as we live in the 20s. It's the 1920s, it's post World War One, it's post the Spanish influenza, and now we also have to worry about demons.
And you also heavily wanted to tell people this is not a young adult book?
Yes, please. There have been some wonderfully flattering lists that have come out with The Chosen and the Beautiful as, best YA to look forward to. And every time I see that list, I get this chill of horror and fear, because there is a fair amount of explicit sex in that book, both explicit sex, a fair amount of drug use. I mean, some selling your soul, but I mean, that's just a factor of being human. So we probably should let teens do that too. I don't know. But it is absolutely not a YA book, and it worries me every time I see it on a list. So please take it off. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. That's been on my mind for a while
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Well, and whereas I was like, you could just skip the whole demon thing and just said, well, it has some explicit sex scenes that are in there. And I'm like, okay, I'll leave
Well,
that.
if I lead with that, it scares people off. I have to ease them in with the demons. That
Good
seems to be the
point.
way to do it.
It's the gateway demon, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of the places that this is also listed is in highlighting queerness and representation in writing, and you identify as queer in your bio. And how does your own queer identity influence your writing?
It's more like a pair of glasses that got stapled to my head, I think is where it comes in. I mean, I am a queer woman. I figured out I was queer when I was maybe 12 or 13, thanks to Thank You Time magazine. It was a very me sort of awakening. And I've always seen the world as a queer woman, and I assume that most of the things I write, if not all the things I write, are going to be queer in one way or another. So we're just gonna lean into it and just make that happen, I think. So it's less of a choice than a direction I was going in anyway.
Do you there's always there's very little more amusing than someone from one identity trying to write the perspective of another identity. And I'm going to lump that into people who don't have large mammary glands trying to write about what it's like to have them, to people who do not have penises trying to write about those. Do you ever have any, at least from a first person perspective, do you ever feel any pressure to try and be more representative because of that label that's put on you as, look, she's a representative of the queer culture in writing, yay! And then suddenly you have all of this weight on you, like, oh, I have to make sure I do a good job.
Mostly I have to do a good job because I have a cat to feed and he eats the expensive food.
But
So I mean,
was not nominated for
there's
a
that.
Hugo. Not
Let's
nominated.
let's start. Yeah, no, he's devastated. He's utterly devastated that he was not nominated this year. Although I will pitch a pets of sci-fi writers, science spec fic writers. I would love that as a category. Actually, I don't know. It feels like, I mean, there is a weight there. I think that when you are speaking of anyone who is not yourself, I think you have to be open to the idea that you're going to get it wrong, because that's what we do. We're humans. We're not perfect. The best we can do is say, I'm going to do my best. And if you fuck up, say, I'm sorry, I won't do that again. When it comes to being a queer representative, I think I'm just in that really narrow band of age. I'm going to be 40 this year, where that ship has sailed. I am bad representation for everyone. It's like at one point, comedian Margaret Cho was asked, do you ever worry about embarrassing your Korean parents by saying what you do on stage? And I think her response was something like, I think I'd be an embarrassment to everyone's parents. It's one of the things I think that happens when you grow up and you have no choice but to be yourself is that when it comes right down to it, all you can represent is yourself. And if you act as a signpost for other people, that is wonderful. And you have to understand, you will not be a signpost for everyone. For some people, you will be a monster, and you will be reprehensible, and you will be disgusting. And you kind of have to just be okay with that. I am.
Yeah, I always like to think of it as a no, you shouldn't try to be her, but yes, she is proof that that these voices are valuable and have been long overlooked.
I want people to be more themselves, I think, is what it
Right,
comes down to,
exactly.
mostly.
Right, and as a father of four biracial daughters, representation growing up was always a huge thing for them to try and see people out there. They're all older than you, so it doesn't. Well, no, they aren't actually. They aren't quite older than you, but yeah, they're older. So so too late for that. But what I do want to just say is that I hope that people don't if somebody said what are some of the best books that you've read this year, I would say Empress of Salt and Fortune as one of them.
Thank you.
And then if somebody came back with, well, yeah, but I mean I'm saying this because actually someone did unfortunately say it's like, yeah, I mean regular books, not just not the queer books. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is just a good book. It happens to be queer, but there's this other thing here, and them's fighting words.
I just don't talk to many people who don't see queer as the
Yeah.
base state. It's a huge relief. My friend circle it's like, we're like, what do you mean straight people exist? We forgot about that. I'm sorry.
Yes. Or what is I don't understand straight people.
No, that's new to me. That's new.
Are they all right?
Or the fact that it feels like everyone I know, whoever said that whoever claimed a straight identity, now is not. And I'm like, well, that was a progression. I guess we just find each other.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I have one person I know who I like, that is my one straight friend, and I have to keep him. I have to hang on to him for dear life, because if he disappears, then what will happen? But in other things, just to talk about writing for a bit. So you have in your bio and in interviews, you often talk about how much you are a short story person, short attention span. You want to just write some stories. Short stories are a comfort zone. But now you have two novels. I mean, you got one that's published, you got one that's coming out, soon. Has that affected your, not your identity as a short story writer, but has that affected your writing? Like, oh, hey, I can do this now, or are you guys just, how has that changed things?
Mostly it's when I sit down to write a novel. I just sit down and then suddenly I think, wait, I'm not going to be done when I stand up. And part of it is dealing with that grief and that sorrow. Um,
I don't mean to
I
laugh at
mean,
your grief and sorrow, but
no,
that.
no, no, it's funny. It's funny. Um, I think what it comes down to is the fact that I'm a short story writer because I'm lazy. I am great. I am so dreadfully, dreadfully lazy. And the wonderful thing about a short story is just the ability to pull back and see it as a whole. It's significantly harder for me to do that as a novel writer. But I mean, honestly, well, for my day job for quite some time was ghostwriter, copywriter. And when you write for pay and when you write per word, you get very good at knowing how much 5,000 words is, how long 10,000 words will take. And when it came to making the jump between short story and novel, I went, wait a minute, that's just several short stories nailed together. I can do that, which had the effect of my first novel. When I submitted it to Diana Fox, who's my agent, at one point during the editing process, she says, honey, you know that we can all see that that's three novellas in a trench coat, right? And I'm like, I was kind of hoping you couldn't, but I'm not going to say that. I guess that looks bad on both of us. It's been a process, and all I know is that I'm like, okay, I can do 5,000 words, I can do 20,000 words, I can do 40,000 words. I guess it's just a little bit more if I just hop over into novel or novella. So I'm just constantly wondering how much word count I can get away with not giving you.
So, real talk, now that
Mhm.
you've had The Chosen and Beautiful published, you're like making your living as a writer full time and just basking in all the fame and glory, right?
Wow, that sounds really nice.
That's always, I mean, honestly, I used to have that fantasy too of like, hey, if I just get a novel published and I won't have to worry about house payments or anything like that. What is the reality of having your first book published?
The reality is there is this heartbreaking reality where you realize how lucky, well, I realize how lucky I am. I've been in this position and that I have the job that I have and that I can wait 6 to 8 months for a check to clear. That is one of the darker realities of this. If you're living a life that doesn't allow for, yeah, okay, well, let's be frank about this. Is it all right if I speak real numbers?
As much as you want to, sure.
Okay, sure. Let's see. The Chosen and the Beautiful was sold with another book, Siren Queen, which is coming out next year, which I'm super excited about. Just finished the edits on it. Thank God that's out the door. But they were sold for a price of $25,000 a piece. Now, out of that, my agent takes 20%. I'm trying to get the numbers right here, which I can't believe that she only works for 20%. Diana A. Fox works so hard. Um, so there's that. There's the fact that the government takes another quarter, because, yay, freelance self-employed tax. Isn't that
Hmm.
fantastic?
Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah, I know it hurts so
Yeah.
bad. And it is a lovely chunk of money to have show up in your account. I mean, I don't think anyone is ever unhappy to see random 10,000. And it comes in thirds because there's a third of it shows up upon signing, a third of it shows up upon manuscript delivery, and a third of it shows up upon manuscript publishing, actual publication, like June 1st. And that is a large amount of money. Definitely my eyes got pretty wide when I saw it. And then it's chopped up and then it's distributed at very strange points. Um, and I'm not saying that it doesn't have its charms. I think at one point, Diana's foreign rights department sold the Italian rights to the Singing Hills cycle.
Hmm.
And suddenly there was $6,000 I didn't see coming. And I'm like, that's just a thing that happened to me, huh? And I'm still, as someone who is very used to working per word and knowing exactly how much money is coming in every week, even as someone who's a freelancer, that was a jump to make. And it's it's harrowing. It's harrowing, and it's too easy to see how people who are very talented, who have stories that I would deeply like to read, would not would have a lot of trouble making that jump from, writing is this thing I do that keeps me away from my loved ones late at night when I should be sleeping, to trying to make it into a regular job that you go to and you have time for everything else. And that's been sobering. That's been sobering and dark. And I don't know what I would have said 10 years ago if someone had told me, okay, this is what writing is, and this is how your money comes in. And given the fact that I don't listen to people very well, probably I would have done it anyway. But I think that there's a reality there that we should probably acknowledge, that the way that money comes in for publishing really does not work for everyone.
Right. And it's a don't quit your day job kind of thing. With well, for most authors, I'm
Yeah.
a have long followed Cameron Hurley as an author, and she's been very real about, here's what the numbers look like, just like you did. Thank you very much for that, because I think it's important that people understand what they're getting into if they want to get into that particular industry and things.
Hmm.
Did you ever consider like the self-publishing or Wattpad or something like that?
No, and once again, we're going to go back to that thing I said where I'm lazy.
Ah, yes, good point.
No, it's I have friends who self-publish. I know people who self-publish, and I really like it that Tor.com sets me up with these things. I love the fact that I don't have to worry about what my cover looks, and it's just like opening a present, and suddenly, I'm looking at a cover from Alyssa Winans, who did the Empress of Salt and Fortune, or I'm looking at Greg Ruth's cover, who did Chosen and the Beautiful, and I'm like, oh, that's great, and I did absolutely no work to make this happen, you know.
And now you're seeing fan art too. There's some gorgeous fan art
Oh
on
my
your.
God! Someone did a piece of when the tiger came down the mountain fan art, and they made that look so buff. And I'm like, yes, yes, she's a were-tiger. She looks really buff and scary. Make that happen for me, please. And I mean, but yeah, it's self-publishing is a very worthy endeavor. I think it's wonderful. I'm not saying, never say never, but it is a ton of work. It is so much work, and to be honest, it's a different skill set. Just because I can, show up on time for an interview and make sure that, at least half of my lipstick is on, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be amazing when it comes to promotion or blurbs or, choosing the right cover or promotion. My skill set is surprisingly limited. I can do this, and I can sew, and I can probably bake you a decent muffin.
You said half the lipstick, and I'm like, wait a minute, you believe in the ritual of lipstick? Does that mean you only did half the ritual? Uh,
I'm saying I do my best, but sometimes I don't sleep very much, and things just happen.
Gotcha. Um, the I guess towards that end. So where if you have to do your day job, and that involves writing too, is from what I'm hearing. Um, how do you find the energy? Is that where the lack of sleep becomes an advantage, in that you just keep writing? I mean, a lot of people, if their day job involves being creative, they can't necessarily bring that into the end. And by a lot of people, I mean me. But what is a typical knee writing day look like?
I just wanted to be clear. I've actually taken a hiatus from my day job to work on some stuff coming up this year. So,
Hmm.
so it's dreadfully scary. I don't know what I am without the weight of clients. And like it's like traditional publishing seems to be big deadlines, and I'm used to working with very small deadlines. So a day for me is, first, I probably stayed up too late, so it's probably the sky is probably getting kind of light when I finally go to sleep. Around about, like, say 10 or so, my cat pokes me to make sure I'm not dead. Um, and the worst part is he's not even doing it to get food. He just wants to know if I'm dead. So if I'm dead, then he should just lie down and throw himself on my funeral pyre like a good wife, you know. Um, so I get up, I get some exercise in, I stare at the work, and then I don't do it for another hour. And I've always admired writers who have these incredibly strict schedules, and I'm not there. And at this point, I probably will never be there. But at some point, in some strange fog, the work eventually gets done. Stardew Valley was probably played sometime in there. Usually by the time I've gone to sleep, I've made something or played some music or drawn something, because a day that passes when I don't do that, I feel very weird and unweighted. I've probably talked with a friend about Hannibal and how I have feelings about Brian Fuller's TV show. That's probably happened somewhere. I've probably thought at least a little bit about Lucille Sharp from Crimson Peak. Um, and the nice thing about my friends is that they know I love them and that sometimes I just orbit kind of weirdly. So it's not quite you'll see me when you'll see me, but it is a little bit. And they're very forgiving, which is why I always try to make sure that they get a mention in my acknowledgments.
Excellent.
And then at some point I pass out and the cycle repeats.
And it repeats himself. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned the Hannibal, and I was going to say that was another thing that a quote I found in one of the interviews you did, which is that when you were growing up, I mostly gravitate towards books with pretty covers that I got from garage sales, which is how I ended up reading Red Dragon by Tom Harris, the prequel to Silence of the Lambs, way too early. So going by covers is not the best technique in the world. And that may be, that's the issue with your book, is that your book looks like a perfectly innocent, happy, I would totally be comfortable having that a YA book. And then you open it.
I guess the next step is saying to Tor, okay, Tor, it's like Rushi, Christine, can we just put some graphic fucking on the cover of the book? Is that a thing we can do? I mean, that sounds like something I would ask anyway, but I'm just going to push that to the head of the, I'm just going to push that to the head of the next meeting they have to have with me.
But seriously, I mean, it sounds like that is not like, and so does that mean you like the Michael Manning version?
No.
No?
No,
oh man, maybe I just saw too much Miami Vice. I just
No, when it comes right down to it, I read most of Thomas Harris's stuff when I was very young. So I have these sort of fever images of pigs and people getting eaten, which is great. That's a fantastic thing to have just buried for myself in my psyche. But when it comes to versions I like versus versions I love, Brian Fuller's vision is absolutely the one that I adore. I still need to watch the young Hannibal version, which I haven't managed to get into. What'd you think? No,
I didn't enjoy it very much.
There are some creatures that do not need an explanation, and that's the way I've always felt about Hannibal Lecter. And I feel that Brian Fuller gets that. We're not there for the explanation. We're there for people played it up very nicely, and for bad things happening to Will Graham and Clarice Starling.
Fair enough. Yeah, good point. But what other in terms of like the genre you've gravitated towards is fantasy and science fiction. So, well, I don't know if would you qualify it as science fiction or fantasy in terms of your writing?
I think I like to call it spec fic because then I can do whatever I want and then it becomes other people's problem to figure it out.
Nice, well done.
I love it when things are other people's problem.
Gotcha. So, what authors influenced you by that? Whether it was I can do better than this or I want to be like this person.
Let's see. Patricia Reedy, who wrote Dealing with Dragons, she did something with language that I read when I was very young, and my brain clicked, and I said, yes, I want to do that. The Godfather, Mario Puzo's The Godfather. Huh. Like I said, in terms of it's a weird story. You can't read The Godfather and not realize that it's ridiculous. It is so wonderfully over the top. And one of the best things about The Godfather for me was realizing that, they don't have to, the story doesn't have to be real to be true. It's of all things, that was one of the ones from my childhood where I realized you should nod to reality because that's the world we're all living in. But it needs to be true. More than being real, it needs to be true. And my favorite writers do that. Neil Gaiman does it. Angela Carter does it. Patricia Highsmith as well, whose work I love but never recommend. And I think that's the wonderful part of it. It's especially if you're a fantasist. It's not real, but it is true.
Do you ever find that whatever you're reading at the time is influencing your own writing, or are you able to keep those things compartmentalized?
Oh no, I have to be on a strict media diet when I'm writing certain things. It's genuinely very sad. Like there was a point when I was writing Siren Queen, and which is book coming out next year, and it's 1930s Hollywood run on fairyland rules, and I reached a point and I'm like, okay. You cannot rewatch Hannibal while you're writing this. Everyone gets too murdery, and it's I don't really have beta readers or a critique circle or anything, but I have talked about it with my friends, and they're like, yeah, there's only so murdery you can let this story get. There's some, you can have some murder as a treat, but not as much as Brian Fuller gets to have. And I'm like, well, if Brian Fuller gets to have it, why can't I? And the answer is, I'm not Brian Fuller. I don't have his budget, and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee. It's a very different situation.
So another quote, and this comes from the idea of the stories, is referring. So the Singing Hills stories, and is that referencing which all body of work is that referencing?
The Singing Hills stories comes from a lot of different places. Let's see. I used to watch these martial arts dramas with my grandfather when I was a little kid. And the thing about me and previous generations of my family is there is actually a fairly strong language divide, especially after I started going to school and English de facto became my first language. It was actually my third language for when I was a little kid. So my grandfather was dealing with a little kid who was increasingly not able to understand him, except in the ways that were convenient to her, of course, because I still needed the cookies off the high shelf. But we could actually bond over the wuxia dramas he loved, because the same way we could bond over westerns, because we generally knew who the bad guy was, we generally knew who the good guy was, and it's not that the stories are simple, but the stories are simple to follow even if you don't necessarily speak the language, especially if you're dealing with a tiny child with an attention span issue. So that's one place that they come from. Another place they come from is a great deal of respect for actual YA author Lawrence Yep, who wrote Dragon of the Lost Sea, which is one of my favorite fantasies when I was growing up, and also who also has this great history series about Chinese Americans throughout the history of the United States. So it came from there. It came from, they also originally come from Tor.com putting out a call for novellas, I'm reading through and I'm like, oh, there's only 20,000 words. I'm pretty sure I can write 20,000 words. And that's part of where Empress comes from. But it comes from a lot of places, I think, like all stories do. It comes from places I haven't even recognized yet. It comes from, a lot of nights where I couldn't sleep and then, well, I might as well be doing this.
Right. Well, and the reason I was thinking about that is that you said that those are stories about stories and how you tell stories and why you tell stories and where you get it wrong and where you get it right, even when the stories aren't real and true. And that's paraphrasing your words in an interview. And when I read that part of the interview, I had previously in the morning seen yet another thing about the whole manufactured crisis by the conservative side about critical race theory and the teaching of history, and the idea of where people history isn't always written by the victors. Sometimes it's rewritten by the losers. And I was wondering if you seeing that happening now is more resonates with that feeling, or if you've just been like, oh yeah, this is more of the same, it's just headlines now.
For me, it was very much next verse same as the first. It's one of those things where growing up in my household, there was a lot of he said, she said, and there was a lot of very history was the stories we got at the dinner table talking about on a very happy note. Like, it was pretty normal when I was a kid for the general family gossip to be, oh, did you hear she found her brother again? Because after the displacement of the war, there was a lot of broken families. There were a lot of people who lost each other. So this is just one of the things that just kind of happened throughout my childhood. Do you know who was found? On the darker side, there is, do you know who was lost? And this is and that's a type of history as well. It's different from George Washington cut down the apple tree. It's this, and I very quickly, in my head, history became stories. History is an intimate thing that you live with every morning. History is that terrible story that you were told as a kid on your way out to school, because that's what you needed to deal with, as you're trying to navigate what being a third grader means. And history is a thing that is first and foremost told, and it is told with an agenda, whether they know it or not. And it is told by someone who is maybe telling you what they know is the truth, who is maybe telling you what they want you to think is the truth, which are two different things. And I started to sharpen it with Empress because I knew the story I wanted to tell. I got to know Chi a little bit later than I did the core of the story. And then when I got to know Chi and when I started to think about the random things I was throwing on them, I was like, wait, there's something going on here. And that is why I think hopefully whenever anyone picks up a Singing Hills novella, they're going to get a different experience. It's going to be different every time. The scope of the story, the type of story that's told, who is talking. So hopefully I'll be able to keep that interesting. But so far I think I will, because I have a lot of thoughts about how we tell stories and why we do it.
So along those lines, you have Gatsby, and you just gave us a preview of the Sirens being in 1930s Hollywood. I'm sensing a sort of historical theme here, 20s, 30s. Is this an ongoing? What is it about that period of time that draws you to it?
I'm not sure if I'm actually drawn to anything so much as I show up with a story idea and I'm just going to run with it and see what happens. The 20s and the 30s, especially for me, are an interesting point of history because they are both so recent in the grand scheme of things, and at the same time, they are a different country. It is, and a long lost country as well. There's no going back to the 20s. The people who remember it, who remember in person, growing fewer every day, and their memories at this point are those of children, not those of adults, and that makes a difference. I think part of it is the fact that they still feel very present. A lot of the things that happened in both the 20s and the 30s continue to echo for us today. And I think that the more we go back and look at that era, the more we realize so very little has changed, and how we find ourselves in it, and how we'll always find ourselves in history, no matter who you are. Like one of the things that I turned up during my research for The Chosen and the Beautiful is that Vietnamese people have always been, in the United States. There's this pervasive myth that Vietnamese only came to the United States during after the war, and actually turns out that there have always been wealthy tourists from all over the world. So there are these wonderful travel logs from Vietnamese travelers who came to the United States and were, apparently they did this wonderful tourist thing where they're like, well, they hit New York and then they hit San Francisco, and then they assumed that they knew exactly what the United States was, which was just so much fun to read. And at the same time, and far more numerous, there were Vietnamese steamship workers who came over on French freighters, dumped ship, stayed for a while, enjoyed the food in Louisiana, which, as one travelogue said, which I really was incredibly delighted with. But I mean, as we go into history, especially as we go into more recent history or even more distant history, we learn that we were always there. That's the wonderful thing. We were always there.
Nice. That sounds like it would feel good to see that. Speaking of history, you have joined a certain, hopefully unique segment of history, in that you are the pandemic debut author. So you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Not only am I a pandemic debut author, all three of my releases have been during the pandemic at this point. So Empress basically came out in the first days of lockdown. Tiger came out square in the middle of lockdown during December, and Chosen came out June 1st, when we were just beginning to release some of the pressures out here in Wisconsin. So it's been weird. I have no idea what a non-pandemic writer's career is like. So, I've never done I finally did my very first in-person, book signing, just to sign books for Boswell out here on the East Side. Mm-hmm. And I didn't invite anyone. That's my big achievement that day, because I was just assuming that when it came time to actually do promotion events, I would just be feral. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Don't touch me. I don't know who you are. So, I'm just going to rely on librarians and booksellers to try to like re-socialize me. But unfortunately they've missed that window. They've like when you raise kittens, there's that window where you have to touch them, otherwise they're always kind of like nervous. And I think I'm afraid I'm like that now. So beyond that, there have been some very strange blessings about it. Some people have looked at Empress when it came out after the pandemic, and they're like, okay, my attention span is shot to hell. Oh, this is only 100 pages. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly how I felt writing it. It's very short. You can pick it up, you can put it down, you can use it to gently fan yourself, whatever you need.
I fall into that, as well as it fell neatly into the category of something that would take me out of my present reality and into a totally different world that just that felt real and immersive, and at the same time didn't bear any resemblance to my world, which is what I needed at the time. So that definitely helped out. And now that you mentioned things have been lifting, have you gotten to go to any Pride events in Milwaukee for this month and things? This is, by the way, a not so subtle segue. So.
No, I think things are still gearing up. I was very happy to go sign the books over at Boswell. They have some of my autographed books in case anyone wanted one, and they were so kind to me, and they were so sweet. And it was definitely one of those moments where, and booksellers read, that's kind of their thing. And then I sort of it was for the first time I met someone in the wild who had actually read my book. And it's different. It's been wonderful. I've had great interviewers and people who've talked with me about my books online, but then suddenly it's in person, and I'm like, oh, this is a thing that's happening. Oh wow, what's that like? and my first thing, and my first instinct when they said that they had read The Chosen, the Beautiful, and Empress was oh, are we okay? Like, are you and I all right together? It's like, you're not mad at me, are you? And it turns out, no, they weren't mad at me at all. So that's great. So no, it's been interesting watching my books come out in a pandemic. I managed to get I got a novel and a novella written, 2 novellas written during the pandemic, so I've got that going for me. But yeah, it's been weird, and I don't know if I know how to be a non-pandemic writer yet, so we'll figure it out.
Funny enough, I'm doing a bad job of being executive director because I'm having so much fun talking to you. In that, the reason we're doing the stream is for a fundraiser. And
oh, sure. Yes.
So the not so subtle segue is that today is the day that we actually released the brainchild of our store manager, which is a variation on this shirt. This is the shirt we had last year, and this year we have a variation on that with which we are explicitly making about the Pride month, because last year we were in July, this year we're in June, and we featured it on the website, which is right up there. You can see it. You can't see it, Nia, but people who are watching can see the website up there, and we're going to be donating half of all the profits from that shirt to an LGBTQIA plus the community center. That will hopefully enjoy the donation, because that's part of what we're about, trying to get that done. So that's a not so subtle plug to, hey, go up to the site, look at the cool things that we have out there, and snap them up while you can, because there's a few things that I made live, and then boom, they were gone. So that was that. And also I will say that I will be talking with you hopefully after this event about possibly getting some signed books here at Worldbuilders of yours.
Sure, yeah.
Definitely enjoy that. I don't want to say we will or won't, because I don't want to put that pressure on you in public. But coercion only works if you have consent. So that way.
I'm going to just be very blunt about it. Tor has given me a lot of books, and Tor.com has given me a lot of books, and they think I have way more friends than I do. Great.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. There you go.
Writers have no friends. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not true. I guess I haven't spoken to you in a long time. So yeah. Now I totally derailed my own writing here. Let's look at the notes. What is on the script? And as our listeners know, I always do the script totally. Yes, here we go. You said the best tool for dismantling history is first to ask who is talking and why. Can you unpack that at all or expand on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, like I said before, if you assume that history is a story, and stories can be very true, stories can be full of facts, and they can be honest stories, but you need to look at who is talking and why they are speaking. What is their agenda? Why are they talking to you? Like, which I mean, sounds incredibly misanthropic, but I mean, that's just basically me at a bus stop. I'm like, why are you talking to me? Why is this happening to me? Um, but I mean, when it comes right down to it, and the thing is, I think as someone who tells stories and hears stories pretty reflexively, I was shocked when I realized that other people don't know they're doing it. Every story, like starting from, once upon a time, or hey, I got so drunk and guess where I ended up last night. Those are all stories. And sometimes the urge there is to entertain you, to make you laugh, to make you happy. Sometimes the story is there to make you like the teller. Come on, we've all been at that bar, we've all talked to that person, I think. Um, and from there, I think it just grows out, especially when you get into stories about country, especially when you get to stories about identity. When you're looking at stories about identity and country, you may very well be looking at means of control. And I mean, what's that line? It's all about sex, unless it's about sex, in which case it's all about power.
Power, yeah.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol, I think, was that.
And yeah, and that's a thing. That's absolutely a thing. And when it comes right down to stories, which are important to me, I mean, it made so much sense to me when I heard that one of the proposed names for Homo sapien, one of the alternatives, was Homo narens, which is storytelling man.
Ooh,
And is that
would have
great?
that would have been. I much prefer that one.
Me too. Me too. It's like wisdom in short supply, but we all tell stories. We all do it in, and so I mean, some of us have made it into livelihoods, into professions. People I care about very much who have made like role playing games, people who
Mhm.
make video games. We're trying to give an experience, and I'm not going to go so far as to say that we want to change that whenever we tell a story, we want to change the world around us. But that's on the table. Every time we tell a story,
Mhm.
changing the world is on the table, even if it's just one person's world. And I'm never going to denigrate how big one person's world can be or what the effects of that are. So, yes, I think we should tell our stories deliberately. I think we should look at who is telling stories to us. And I think we should have both a sense of wonder and a healthy sense of skepticism.
Nice. Yes. Yeah, I mean, World Builders itself, when people ask, what is it that you do? I mean, yes, on the surface, we raise money for Heifer, for Mercy Corps, for, different community centers. But throwing money at them, it helps, but it's treating the symptom, not the actual problems themselves. And so what I feel like World Builders' real job is to find the stories that will help change the world for the better and then amplify them, which is part of why you're here. But speaking of sex, you did put in the explicit warning for your book,
Mhm.
and so that had to be a deliberate choice. Like there's the sort of fade to black, the ellipsis, the whatever what I call it version of that, um, and then yeah, my the chat noticed that segue. Um, she said the quote about sex. That wasn't just me.
Mhm.
But the question is, what made you decide? No, I'm gonna write this out. Was it just the fun of writing it out, or
Well, first, sex is deeply fun to write. I highly encourage it for everyone. It's also some of it. I mean, writing sex is also a bit of a technical challenge. It's in a lot of ways, technically, it's no different from writing a fight scene. You have to keep track of where the limbs are. You have to keep track of what everyone's doing, and people will notice if you don't. That is one place where they absolutely start noticing any flaws you have as a writer, because that's where your continuity actually starts breaking
how
down,
could their left arm
especially if
have
you're not
been
comfortable
there? I
with
don't understand that. Yeah.
it. What is the people don't bend like that? Do they bend like that? Maybe they do. Just questions all around for everyone. Part of it was the fact that let's see. Yes, deciding to put explicit sex into The Chosen the Beautiful was absolutely personal. Was absolutely a choice I made. It wasn't some of those. It wasn't one of those things that sort of snuck up on me the way that some things do. Um, And there are a lot of reasons for it. Part of it is I think it's fun to write sex. Part of it is I think that one of the more interesting things that I kind of wanted to get across is I wanted sex to show us who the characters were, because I think where sex succeeds on a narrative level is when it reveals something about the characters that you maybe didn't know before. And that's not like a hard and fast rule. I have definitely seen sex scenes in books where I was just like, I'm just happy this is here. Um, but I mean, for example, in The Chosen and the Beautiful, one of the things is that one of the threads running through it is the idea of reproductive freedom and reproductive abuse. In the 1920s, we were still looking at a time when mail order birth control is illegal. We were looking at a time when women couldn't necessarily buy condoms. That was something that a man did. Had to go to the drugstore. I think the line is what, take something for the weekend, sir. And so, so the overwhelming national narrative at the time was, you don't have sex. And the answer is, that is so wrong. We have never made people not have sex. So what do you do if you're a relatively liberated 20-year-old woman in the 1920s? You've already had a bad experience with a friend's abortion. You've already, I feel like that's a very common experience for teenagers who, for teenagers who have had sex. It's the fear, and it's the uncertainty, and it's the fear of pregnancy, for example. So what do you do? And the answer is, well, in my book, it's have sex like Jordan does, which is have sex with women, have sex with people who don't have penises, have sex with, or have non-penetrative sex, And that was something I didn't see very often. So that's why those scenes are in the book. It's also specifically, I wanted to show the relationship with Jordan and Nick. I wanted to show that dynamic in an intimate moment. And once again, I'm just going to go back to now. I'm saying all of this stuff, and it sounds pretty good, but I think I need to be honest today. It was just fun to write.
Makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, I brought to mind. Apparently, New York City put out some safer sex guidelines for COVID times, and a late night host was making fun of it, because one of the things it talks about in that guideline is, be more creative with barriers, and like a wall, or if you go to sex parties, make sure it's in a well ventilated space and things like that. And the comedian was just saying, this is just ridiculous. These things don't really happen to people. This is ridiculous. And yeah, I saw your eyes widen there, and I'm like, or just maybe that guideline wasn't written for you. Like maybe that's what it is.
I mean, it's such a human thing. I mean, I'm like, you gave us a rule, and now we're gonna, and of course, what do you think we're going to do with it?
I have to share this with you, because this came from chat, and it's from one of my favorite people, Karim Shot, who is a regular contributor on our Discord channel and to our streams, and recommends some of the most amazing books. And he just was saying that what you were describing about how to avoid pregnancy there in the thing is also a pretty common tactic here in my part of the world for similar reasons. People boink, but avoid the last mile, which
there you go.
Very, very nice use of metaphor there. Avoid boinking the last mile. That. We are just about at the end of our time. I would like to do with you what's known as the lightning round
Sure.
among us here at Worldbuilders, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions that don't actually have to do with writing and things like that.
Okay.
And I might adjust them slightly, but the first one is, I say, hey, guess what? I get to come down and pick up those signed books from you, and I'm going to take you out and buy you the beverage of your choice. What would you like to have?
Root beer. I really want a root beer.
Root beer. Okay.
Yeah.
Any specific brand?
No, I'm.
Okay, then I'm going to make sure that we get you
yeah.
some Point Brewery root beer.
Oh, that sounds great.
They make really good stuff up here, and and it's one of the oldest breweries in the U.S. So
Ooh.
it's actually some period root beer from that.
That sounds really exciting.
The question came out: with ice cream or without?
With ice cream if I deserve it. Let's go with that. It's like,
Okay.
I want to make sure I give you enough books
Have you
to
hit your
warrant
word
the ice
count?
cream.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the next question is, I say, hey, you know what? Actually, this is so many books more than we thought. I
Oh,
actually want to take you out to dinner. What would you like to have for a meal?
uh, actually, we should totally go to that. There's an Ethiopian place that I really enjoy that I think you would really dig.
Oh,
Actually,
yes. If there's a good Ethiopian place there, I would love it because
yes, yes. We actually have two great Ethiopian places here in Milwaukee.
Stevens Point is a wonderful place, but we are sadly without a good Ethiopian
Oh
restaurant.
no.
Um, okay, so you've already told me a lot of books that you like and enjoy, but I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going on a plane. I gotta pick up a book, a paperback. Just what should I grab for a good 2 hour fun read?
How about Susanna Clark's Piranesi? It's
Huh.
yeah, it's a sort of a horrifying portal fantasy, and it's very old. It's both old school horror, and it's the wonders of isolation and a single man living in a house that is full of tides. It's beautiful.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm going to have to write that one down.
Oh, it's great.
Cool. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, I don't have the attention span for a book. I need to stream something. Anything good that you can recommend for binge watching?
Okay, so I have this thing where I have weird feelings about Mads Mikkelsen. So I just put his name into any sort of search engine and I watch whatever he was in. I don't
Uh-huh.
necessarily like it, but I'm usually interested by it.
Polar. Have you seen?
I was not sure about Polar, especially because it came out when Arctic did, and I kept getting the two of them confused. I'm still trying to
Mhm.
sort myself out on that.
Gotcha. We really, my partner and I really enjoyed that. But then again, we're like
Oh,
fans of the whole John Wick. It
oh, sure.
it
That
it,
one felt very
it
grindhouse.
outwicks John Wick. Yeah.
Oh, wow,
But
yeah.
it also it's Mads Mikkelsen at his best. Oh, he's so good. Um, all right. So, what is something that you always have around you, but that doesn't necessarily serve a material, practical purpose?
Okay, so wherever I go, like small pieces of fabric just happen.
Huh?
That's just a thing that happens. Yeah.
Is it related to your crafting kind of thing?
You wish it was, but I don't think it is. I don't recognize this fabric at all.
Okay, there you go. But
Yeah, yeah.
spontaneously comes.
Mhm.
Um, then the last question I have,
Okay.
I have a magic wand that looks suspiciously like a pen, but it's really a magic wand. And
Heard
with
that one
this
before.
wand, I can wave it, and anyone, past, present, future, alive, dead, real, or fictional, can suddenly appear and want to have a conversation with you. Who
Hmm.
would you like to have appear?
Let's see. I would like to go back to my first Homo sapien ancestress and just figure. I'm like, so how's it going back there? What's going on at the dawn of modern human history? That's exactly who I want to speak to. And then I'm not sure if language has developed at that point, so probably I would just take her out for an Ethiopian meal. I think that'd be fun for her. There we
So,
go.
strangely enough, on
Hmm.
Tuesday, or no, on Wednesday, we interviewed Jason Sanford, who was an archaeologist, and we asked him this question. He said he would love to meet a Homo erectus or one of those primordial ancestors, and he
Oh,
assured us that with his background in that they did have language, so you could have a conversation with them.
I'm bad enough with English, so it'll still probably wind up with a very awkward sharing of food, as is our Midwestern language.
True enough. And my compartmentalizing mind is going, he also specializes in short stories. So I wonder if there's some connection here. But anyway, well, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's a delight to talk to you just because we haven't
Oh, it's
talked
been
in a
wonderful.
long time.
No, we haven't.
But also I appreciate you supporting World Builders in this and
Of
helping
course.
to amplify our cause. And we are always happy to have you back here. You can get The Chosen and the Beautiful on our worldbuildersmarket.com right now, but I'm going to suggest that
Ooh.
you wait because after this broadcast, we're going to talk and see if we can get some signed copies possibly into our Indiegogo. So
Get some books out of my house. That sounds great.
yeah, absolutely, very happy to do so. Thank you so
Mhm.
much, Nee.
Of
Where would
course.
you like people? I mean, Nevo Writing is I think your website. Is that right, or is it?
Try me on Twitter, which is Nevo, once again, also Nevo Writing, and I actually managed to update that one. My website basically gets updated when someone has noticed, like, hey, this isn't true anymore. I'm like, oh, better change that.
Great. Oh yeah, we have our producer put in your Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, and the unboxing video, which is just a
Oh,
delight to
thank you.
watch and absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much. And
Of course.
we always use a variation on the word vivamus, which technically is Latin but has become corrected into a moose, to sign off so that we know when people are going to say. So let's see, what would be a good, I know, we will say that the closing word will be chosen moose. The chosen and the moose.
I'd read that. I'd read that in a
Yeah,
heartbeat.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we get that in the chat, we will know it's safe to stop streaming. Yes, we got chosen moose.